November is just around the corner, and that means the 16th Annual National Podcast Post Month is fast approaching. Hi, I'm Jennifer Navarrete, founder of NaPodPomo, and I'm inviting you to join the 30-day Global Podcasting Challenge. Whether you're a newbie looking to start your first podcast or a seasoned pro seeking inspiration, NaPodPomo is the perfect place to experiment and try new things. Visit napodpomo.org to learn more. See where podcasting can take you this November during National Podcast Post Month.
Hi, it's Lynne Golodner, and welcome to the Make Meaning podcast. I'm a writer and entrepreneur, and through decades of writing articles for magazines and newspapers and authoring books, I've learned that we succeed through inspiration from storytelling and deep and mutually beneficial relationships. This show began in 2018 after my father was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and I wanted a way to capture his stories and record his insights. It's grown since then to share stories of how people around the world make meaning from very ordinary pursuits. Now I focus on sharing the stories of writers, authors, and those in the world of publishing to learn how and why we create stories that help us make meaning from the mundane. I'm a former journalist and marketing entrepreneur, and I've been teaching writing for more than 2 decades. As a writing coach, I help authors build their brands and share their words. If you'd like to write with me, check out my offerings at lynnegolodner.com. And you'll find more episodes of this podcast at makemeaning.org, as well as on every podcast platform you can think of. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star review at Apple Podcasts. Thank you for tuning in to the Make Meaning podcast. Now, on to the show. Yeah, it's good for marketing too. I was just on TV the other day in Detroit, where I live, about Women of Valor, and the interviewer asked me about what's next. And I could tell her because I'm already knee deep in the next novel. And so that's really cool because I'm planting seeds already for the audience that I'm building, that there's something else coming. And that's good marketing. So I can't tell you that I planned it that way, but looking back, I'll take full credit. And, I think it's good for all of us to think about.
Okay, everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I have not only an amazing author on the podcast today, I also have a fellow podcaster, so I can nerd out on all things podcasting at the same time. Lynne Golodner is with me, and we're excited to talk about her author journey from journalist to novelist, and she's got big plans. She's going to write a lot of books. So, Lynne, welcome to Living the Next Chapter.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. You just mentioned before we hit record, you just came back from a big event with fellow authors and writers. What was it? And tell us more about that.
Yeah, so September has been busy. Just to back up a little, I led my annual writers retreat on Mackinac Island and in Lake Huron. And so that was an awesome week, and taught a class to Michigan writers up in northern Michigan. And then I came home for just a couple of days, and then I took off for Chicago for the Women's Fiction Writers Association 10th anniversary conference. And there were 350 women's fiction writers there. It was phenomenal. And I have to say, David, this organization, and I've been a part of a lot of organizations, is remarkable in how supportive and friendly and non-competitive the members are. Like, everybody builds each other up, and I just came back on a high. It was so special.
And I could hear that in your voice as soon as you mentioned it. Tell me more about the organization and who's it open to, and how do people become a member of this?
Yeah. So Women's Fiction Writers Association, WFWA, has been around for 10 years, just had the 10th anniversary conference. And it's really for authors who are writing in the women's fiction genre, which is, kind of broad. I mean, there's romance within there, there's suspense within there, literary fiction within there, contemporary fiction, historical fiction. The idea is that in women's fiction, the arc is told through relationships and primarily focused on women characters, but not exclusively. And of course, there are lots of debates today about the term women's fiction. And so there's lots of organizations that are debating whether or not we should keep the term. In the meantime, WFWA is a great place for people who fall within that. And it's from beginning writers who are aspiring to multiple book novelists who just find it to be a great place for camaraderie and community.
Nice. I love that. That is amazing. We'll put links to that as well in the show notes.
Great.
How did you end up getting to be a part of all that?
Well, I'm all about networking and friendships and meeting other authors. And so it was other authors who said, you should join WFWA. And I said, great. And I did. And I'm a pretty new member, maybe a year or two. And I've taught some classes for them and I've taken some classes. And most of it's been virtual. So what I kept hearing the whole conference was, it's so great to meet you in person. And I kept saying that too, because, we live such a virtual life. And this was an opportunity to really like hug people and look in their eyes and have good conversations. And so that was very special. But yeah, that's how I got involved, just from a recommendation from other authors. And I refer other authors to them. And, I've been a part of a lot of organizations, and I feel like this is the one that stands out in this notion of support, camaraderie, encouragement. I have so many people emailing me now saying, send me graphics for your novel debut so I can post on my socials. That's really nice. That's just so beautiful. And I feel like that's the ethos of the organization. And I'm really happy to be a member.
So on top of all that, you are also a podcaster. Tell us about your show as well.
Yeah. So I started podcasting in 2018. My podcast is called the Make Meaning Podcast. And, it's sort of morphed as my career has morphed. It started as a way to interview people who did inspiring, meaningful things, found purpose in their work and their life. And the first episode was an interview with my dad, who had been diagnosed with a terminal leukemia. And so we didn't know if he'd make his 80th birthday, and it aired on his 80th birthday, and he did. He actually lived until 81 and a half. And so he came back on the first anniversary and did that interview as well.
Nice.
But it was really, it started out as I was interviewing people who just, were so inspiring, and how they infuse their days with meaning and purpose. And then it evolved as my marketing career evolved. So when I worked with a lot of nonprofits, I interviewed nonprofit leaders. And then when I worked a lot in education, I interviewed people in that front. And then as I pivoted back to really focusing on my writing as my first love, my priority in my career, I pivoted the podcast. And so now we only focus on featuring authors, people in publishing, anybody who's connected in some way with publishing or the craft of writing. And it's amazing. I have episodes planned out already until May of 2024. And I get requests every day for guests. And I'm like, this is so cool. So I get to talk with authors, hear their journeys. And so anybody listening, if you're an author, I'd love to interview you. It would be great.
And then being at these events that you just mentioned, you're going to meet a whole bunch of other people who could be potential guests, and you got an unlimited supply.
It's really funny because so I saw like the web form come in, because there's a guest submission form you have to fill out. And so I saw it come in, and I wasn't dealing with emails when I was at the conference. And then I met someone, and she came up to me and said, "Hey, I'm so-and-so." I said, "Gosh, your name sounds familiar." Thinking, how do I know this person? And she's like, "Well, I just submitted to be a guest on your podcast." I'm like, "That's what it is." So it was really cool that I got to meet her like the next day at the conference. That was really fun.
Nice. It's amazing. Okay. Take us back. You started in journalism.
Yes.
Take us back to those days and kind of how that story's kind of unfolded for you. Oh, there's a kind of an author reference there. Anyway, how that story's unfolded for you.
Yes. So I'm going to take you back even further, because when I was a kid, I always was writing stories and poems and skits, and, I had little journals and stuff. And I had a journal in the 70s. It was corduroy-covered, and I keep it behind my desk, and I just do it as a reminder of who I've always been. Even when I was in high school, I was on the school paper, and I freelanced for the local newspaper, and, I was really industrious. And then in college as well, freelanced for the local newspaper and worked for the Michigan Daily at the University of Michigan. And so when I graduated, I moved straight to New York. I had a job at a trade newspaper. And the second thing I did after moving there was to attend a writer's workshop in Greenwich Village at the apartment of a woman about 10 years older than me who had grown up in Michigan. And people we had in common had said, "Oh, well, when you go there, you need to, meet this person." And so when I reached out to her, she said, "Well, I host a writer's workshop every Tuesday. You should come." So I was the youngest person there. And there were people of every age, people who'd had like New York Times bestsellers, and people who worked for the New York Times, and people who were just scratching on a page and hoping to get published one day like me. And it was amazing. And so every Tuesday I went there. Sometimes I brought my poems, and I sat in silence as they marked them up. And so I've always been a writer. And when I was doing journalism, I also did my master's of fine arts in writing. And so that was focused on poetry, actually. And my graduate thesis was a manuscript, and it was published in time for graduation. So I came to graduation with a box of books, and that was super cool. I was 25 at the time.
Wow.
So, I did journalism for 15 years, and then I pivoted and I started a marketing company. And so I've done marketing and PR since 2007, always writing on the side. And, on the side was where writing was. So even like the books that I did. So I have 2 poetry collections, 6 nonfiction books. But that was always on the side, and I never expected to make money from it or thought that I could make it a career. And then in the past 5 years or so, I said, well, why can't I? I've been successful as an entrepreneur, and why not figure out how to do that? And so I built this roadmap, and I pivoted everything. So now most of my marketing work is helping authors build their brand and create book marketing strategies. I teach a lot of writing classes still, and, that's just working with authors one-on-one as well as in groups. I lead retreats, and I spend the first part of every day writing. And so everything has just sort of pivoted, as I've decided to prioritize my author career.
There are like 1,000 different paths that we can go down with your background and what you've done. Okay, so let's start with something that seems quite obvious. Your marketing background. For new authors listening, marketing seems to be the one big thing a lot of people struggle with. They go through the process. They have all that hand-holding and support through the writing process, and they get published. And then it feels like they kind of just go into nowhere land, and they're on their own to figure out how to sell this book. It's one thing to write a book. It's another thing to actually have people read it.
Yeah.
So any 101 tips for the authors listening on just getting out there and maybe getting outside of yourself? Maybe a lot of people are pretty introverted as well, on top of everything.
Oh, yes.
So,
Yes. I am as well. I mean, I'm great one-on-one, but when I'm in a big social situation, I can give you 1 hour. Then I need to go and have some quiet time, so I can relate to that. And I just spoke on this topic at the WFWA conference. So that was really, really fun to do. And, I had an hour and I was presenting with someone else. So I'm like, how much can you do in that time? So what I did was I said, I would offer to send the marketing plan template to anybody who wanted to email me. And I can offer that to your listeners as well, if they want to send me an email. But I also said, it's a mindset shift first before it's any marketing tactics. And what I mean by that is, yes, you love to write, and yes, you want to get your books out there, but these days you have to also market your books, and nobody's going to love your books more than you. And so you have to embrace that instead of look at it as, oh, I can't believe I have to spend my time doing this, or I have to spend my resources. It's really important that we understand that this is a huge part of our author career, and that we're going to have to market and build an author brand. And it's a constant thing. It's never going to go away. It's not just this book. It's your whole author career, so that you build your audience and you keep connecting with them. And so that mindset shift is essential first. And then from there, there are lots of things we can do. And so one thing I said was, you don't have to do anything, and you can do everything. And then I talked about how you really want to look at, well, what would be fun for you? So if you hate Instagram, don't do Instagram. I have a client who is comfortable on LinkedIn, which isn't necessarily the social media platform you would think you would use for book marketing, but she's really doing well with it because she's comfortable in that space, and people are really responding to her posts. So make it fun. Like, how can you make this fun? And marketing can be fun, especially if it's promoting a book that you're so proud of.
And that's a big key. I love the idea that go where it's easy for you. It happens in podcasting. It happens in writing. Because if you're most comfortable there, you're going to be the real you in front of your audience and your community. If you're going somewhere that you feels forced or fake, it's going to show in your content and how you show up.
Yeah.
How often you show up.
Sure.
Because it's just it's a job. By that point, you're like, I don't even know why I'm here. I never use this platform for anything else except for what I'm promoting. And I just feels odd, feels salesy.
Yeah. But you know what it is?
Yeah.
I mean, a good salesperson believes in their product.
Right.
And if you don't believe in your book, I mean, who's going to do it better than you?
Right.
You know, to just expect somebody else who doesn't have that heart and soul woven into the chapters to do a better job than you can is kind of a silly expectation if we think about it, you know?
Right.
And there's nothing wrong or shameful in sales, especially when you believe in your product. I used the example in my talk about when I was working with a lot of nonprofits. There was a woman who was the development chair at this big organization for older adults. And she could get money out of a stone. I mean, telling you, she was so good. And I remember asking her, how are you so good at this? And she just looked at me and she said, when you believe in what you're selling, it's really easy and it's contagious. And she's like, these are our elderly folks. This is who built our community. Who doesn't want to support them? Like, I was ready to write a check when she was telling me this, you know? And so that was a really important lesson and something that I had to sort of digest for myself. And I love my books, and I hope you do. And I would love for you to read them and have a conversation about it. So what's shameful about that, you know?
Yeah. And I think that's the one thing we can be proud of what we do. And that's got to shine through in how we present what we do to the world. Exactly what you're talking about. I think if we can show the same pride we have in our children or our relationships or whatever brings us joy, do that for what you're promoting in your book and make it genuine. I think people will be attracted to you and not feel like they're being sold to.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Talk about your writing journey then from journalism. You have some big plans to write a lot on top of everything else you're doing. And we kind of both chuckle at that. So talk about, let's start with some of your big plans, what you see for your future, because I find that exciting and a little bit overwhelming, but at the same time, I can't wait to see this happen. Talk a little bit about your plan.
Thank you, David. I would like to write a book a year for the rest of my life. And so
let's say that one more time.
I would like to write one book every year for the rest of my life.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Wow. Okay. How did you come to that point, first of all? That was like, hey, you know what? This is a goal.
Yeah. So for me, a year to write, revise, finesse, package a book is very doable. I know people who are writing multiple books a year. I don't know how they do it. And I know other people who, they're writing the book and then waiting for a few years for it to come to fruition. I'm a little too impatient for that. And I also feel like, you never know how long you have. So why not jump in and do as much as I can? I love dreaming up the stories and building the characters, really being in the words and seeing how I can make them better. And it's very exciting to me. So I think a year is a good amount of time for me to really work a book to its best place and then be ready to move on to something else. I still love the novel that's coming out on Tuesday, Woman of Valor. And I love that I still love it. I love that I'm not sick of it, and I'm very, very much into my next novel, which is in revisions now, but I'm so into the characters and I think about them a lot. And so I'm still entwined. So I think, but I can see where, and I started this journey with this novel in February. So I spent all of February planning it out and doing character sketches and that kind of thing. And then I started writing in March and I had a good, very messy first draft by May. And so, and then I had I printed it out. I read through it. I made tons of notes and crossed off a lot of stuff and went back to revise and had a good revision, better shape by the end of July. And so now I'm really in the nitty gritty, making sure that there are no holes and making the words more beautiful. And so I think by the end of the year, I feel the story will be where it should be. And so I'm sort of starting to think, well, what would be the next book? I'm not ready to plan it yet, but it's just in the back, but I'm still really tied to this one. And so the best thing you can do as an author, if you're building an author career, which means you're not just, a one-time wonder, you're really it's book after book, because that's how you build, a body of work and a connection with your audience and eventual wealth. But the best thing you can do is when your book is done and it's in production, you start writing the next one, or at least planning it out, because then you don't have all your eggs in one basket. So I was so excited for Woman of Valor, but I didn't know what would happen with publication or sales or anything, that rather than be anxious about that, I started to write the next book. So I didn't have to linger in it, So I think for me, that's a really good balance.
And it's like an assembly line. You're just, the one's just coming off the line. It's all done, nice and shiny. It arrives at your door. You're already on the next one. It's already coming. And the next one is after that. And I could just see them, just these novels and these writings going past you.
Yeah, it's good for marketing too. I was just on TV the other day in Detroit, where I live, about Women of Valor. And the interviewer asked me about what's next. And I could tell her because I'm already knee deep in the next novel. And so that's really cool because I'm planting seeds already for the audience that I'm building, that there's something else coming. And that's good marketing. So I can't tell you that I planned it that way, but looking back, I'll take full credit. And, I think it's good for all of us to think about.
Now I'm going to insert a shameless plug for the name of my podcast, being the Living the Next Chapter podcast, because you're actually doing that. You are living your next chapter every day. So that's exactly what I was hoping for my show. So, wow, you're a great example of that.
Thank you.
How do you stay motivated, though, to do all this? Like, do you have downtime where you're like, I'm not writing even my grocery list. I'm not going to write anything.
Well, I definitely do more than the average person, which can be difficult at times. And I am really conscious about planning downtime. So I never do any work on Saturdays. I write Monday through Friday in the mornings, and it's a finite period of time, but it's on the calendar every day. And then Sundays I work on the business of my writing. So sometimes when I'm not writing a novel, I'll write some creative nonfiction essays, and I might do submissions on Sundays or work on the marketing plan on Sundays or whatever. But I really have that time carved out and also limited. So it's not, I don't write for full days. I still make a living in other ways. And so I'll spend my afternoons working with clients or teaching classes or things like that. But the past few years, I've taken a month-long writing sabbatical in July, where I don't teach any classes. I don't do any of the marketing stuff. I just go somewhere and write and be there and notice and that kind of thing. And I also have a philosophy that when any of my kids ask me to do something with them, I drop everything and do it. So sometimes I'm rearranging the schedule so I can do that. My kids are young adults, so that time is precious. But, if ever I get stuck or have self-doubt, which definitely happens, I have a coach that I work with. I've worked with her for years, and she's in the PR and marketing space, but she's just a really good coach. And so I check in with her every other month and talk about strategy and my goals and my plans or any struggles I'm having. And I actually have another coach that I go to quarterly, who's in Nova Scotia, and we do it via Zoom, but just to sort of, that's more like mindset things. And, and I have all these friends who are writers who I can text, call, email, message on Facebook and say, I feel like an imposter right now, or who's ever going to read my books, and they'll come right back with the words I need to hear. So that's pretty much how I keep motivated.
Okay. So I want you to picture walking in your downtown shopping area of where you live, and you're walking along and there's a storefront that catches your attention, makes you stop and back up to look and see in the store window. And you're like, I've never thought of that. I've never seen that before. It really catches my eye. What catches your eye in authorship outside of what you write in that you're like, wait a minute, I've never even thought of writing that way, or anything catches your eye that you're excited about?
Yeah, I love reading historical fiction, and I don't write historical fiction, but I love it. And it's really, I would say my sweet spot for reading is between 18th century and 20th century. When I go too far back in history, it doesn't grab me as much. I have several friends who've written beautiful books about the Inquisition, and I just can't get into them, even though the writing's gorgeous. It's just a time period that I don't know, it's harder for me to access. I also love reading nature writing or good writing about the outdoors. And that is something that I dabble in at times. And I think it's woven through my books too, especially this next novel. But a lot of my essays are focused on wilderness, nature, that kind of thing. So, those are probably the two areas that just really grab me.
So Women of Valor is coming out. Talk about what is here for us. Maybe what's our our first experience reading one of your books.
Yeah.
Give us the introduction. Tell us what the story's about. And it's coming out really soon. So I want to really spend some time talking about that. So take us on a journey.
Yeah. So Woman of Valor. So I started writing this in 2011, wrote 60 pages, installed because I hadn't planned anything. I didn't know where it was going. So I put it aside for 10 years and I came back to it in 2021. And I said, I liked the bones of the story, but it just needed to totally change. And so I started working on it and I really invested and I'm really proud of the book. There's it's a single POV. It's a main character named Sally, who is a young woman. In the book, she's in her 30s, and she came from Michigan. She moved to Chicago, and she chose to become religious in Judaism. So she's an Orthodox Jewish woman. She's married. She has 3 kids. Life is grand. She loves it. It's a really good choice for her. And then her son is abused at school, and her response and her husband's response are slightly different. And they've never really they've always been on the same page. So when this happens, the action she wants to take versus the action he wants to take are different, and they're sort of at an impasse. And around that time, her ex-boyfriend from college pops back into her life on Facebook and says, I never should have let you go. And she's like, oh my. And so, and he's not Jewish. He's not Orthodox. He's not anything. And so the question is, what is she going to do? The community responds in ways that she didn't expect. And she had felt like such a part of that community. And so she loves being Orthodox. And that was important to me, is that, there are tons of books out there, TV shows, movies about people who are religious and they hate it and they need to get out. But you don't really see a lot about a contemporary person who makes that choice and is happy with that choice. And I really, really wanted that to be a main focus of this book. I also wanted to show the Orthodox Jewish community in ways that a lot of people don't see them. And so, here is a character in love with her husband, with a passionate marriage and a dedicated mother, but an independent thinker. And so I really wanted to sort of buck stereotypes and show a, multifaceted, really cool person, in a place you wouldn't expect. And so it's a book about identity. It's a book about the choices we make, about, there's a suspensefulness to it, which I didn't expect, but an early reader said, it's a suspenseful novel. And I'm like, really? And he said, there's abuse, there's a stalker, there's all kinds of questions. And I'm like, yeah, I guess so. You're right. So there are, but it's not it's not a horror. It's not a, but I think it will keep you on the edge of your seat. And I won't go into any more detail because I don't want any spoilers, but, it may not be what you expect.
Oh, see, now that's how you do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So behind the scenes of my podcast, I do all this stuff. I do the recording, but my wife, Jennifer, she makes sure that I don't mess up. She listens to every episode. And if she gives me the thumbs up, we let it go. Uh-huh. So I can already tell she's going to be a big smile on her face that this is her next book. So I've already sold one already, just so you know, because Jen will be like, I got to have it. So
awesome.
What are your thoughts on audiobooks? And because I think a story like that would be immersive and it'd be kind of cool to be a part of that. Do you do that, or is that part of your plans at all?
It's so funny that you say that, because I was just talking about it at this conference. And yes, I'm just starting to plan the audiobook. And it's so many of my friends are hiring, people who are experienced with this. I'm thinking about doing it myself. I'm not sure, but I podcast and I think I do a good job with it. So, I have a virtual assistant who's great at editing and producing, and she already knows what to do. So I'm like, well, let's just give this a shot and see what happens. So, the audiobook is on the horizon, just not out there yet.
See? It's like I was at the conference. And
yes, you were. Yeah. See,
I probably would stand out quite a lot, but it feels like it's amazing that we're on the same page here. Another reference to writing. Oh, this is terrible.
It's great.
I love it.
It's awesome.
I love it. Okay, so talk about character development a little bit. One thing I heard from one author that really made me smile was she got to a point where she was writing and she got stuck, but her character reached out to her and basically led her through the story, and she was almost the passenger instead of the driver. And it was like they were talking to her. Like, I want to go here. I want to do this. I want to be this person.
Yeah.
Do your
So,
characters talk to you like that?
well, okay. So the first novel I wrote was in the year 2000 and it's never seen the light of day. Probably won't, but that happened to me then. So I spent about 9 months writing that book and it was super rough and needs a lot of work. But I mean, I would come back from the coffee shop where I was writing at the time and I would look at the material and I was like, when did I write that? So it was interesting because it was like they took over the keyboard and they just sort of wrote, through me, which was really neat. I don't know if that happened with Women of Valor. It's possible. I'm so far down the path that I don't remember the early days.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that one of the things I love doing is communing with my characters. And so, like I'll sit down and I'll free write, what is the motivation behind this character? Or like, what does he want? Or what does she want? Or whatever. And I just end up writing and seeing. And then a lot of that ends up in the book, but I'm just so curious. It's like I'm in conversation with them and they do talk. They're not shy. So it's a cool thing. It's really neat.
How different is the finished version of Woman of Valor compared to what you said where the book kind of stopped and you had to change gears? How different are the two writings that you did?
So different. So different. So like the first draft, like the first 60 pages back in 2011, she hated her life. She hated being religious. It was all whiny.
Okay.
So when I came back in 2021, I'm like, we don't need another whiny character. It's like enough. There's a ton of books like that out there. So I wanted her to be confident and happy with her choices and with her lifestyle and everything. In an earlier version of the book from the 2021 version, her husband ended up with cancer. And so that was a pivot point. And I'm like, I don't want to do this either. So I totally took that out and had to recalibrate. So there were different versions that just didn't sit right with me. And I needed to really rethink and say, what needs to happen here? And what do these characters need? So there were some different versions that just didn't resonate with me. So I had to go back to the drawing board.
How much of you do you bake into your characters when you're writing?
Well, I spent 10 years living as an Orthodox Jew. So I left it. So I think we write about what we know and what we don't know, we find out about so that we do know. And so, yes, I knew a lot about the Orthodox world. I have a fair amount of knowledge. But a lot of her experience was not my experience. And, I think people want to see the author in the book. And I actually had a magazine journalist interview me the other day and she said, so this is an autobiographical novel? I'm like, no, it's not. It's fiction. And there's very little, yes, I lived in that world. So I know that world, but I didn't live in Chicago. I've never lived in Chicago. So I had to do that research and learn about that community. I had a boyfriend in college named John. The boyfriend that comes back, his first name is John. That's where the similarity ends, and like Sally is originally from Michigan. So am I. But, you write about what you know. And, my next novel, my main character is from Ann Arbor, Michigan. And so now it's not where it takes place also in Scotland, but I went to school in Ann Arbor, but I haven't lived there as like a resident. So you take little bits of what you know, at least I do, and then you use them for the purpose of creating a whole world.
See, and I don't know. If you haven't caught on listening by now, Lynne has a lot of passion for what she does. I feel like I'm on a bus and we're going somewhere really quickly. And I love it. I love it, though, because the energy that you have just about what you do and the smile and everything about what you do, you can just tell that this is where you need to be.
Thank you.
It's a great feeling when you find your spot.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm really excited. It's a great place to be.
So, okay, a book a year for the rest of your life. That might make people really, really nervous to think about that as a big plan for life. Mm-hmm. For authors, is it important to have a plan that you kind of think about what your writing journey is going to be if you're going to focus on being an author and this is going to be your thing? Is it important?
I think it is, but I don't think you should. I'm not really planning out the rest of my life. Yeah. I'm sort of planning out the next couple of years in detail. Good. And that's it, and then there are surprises along the way. So each year, I make a plan, but then it might change and I might look back and say, oh, look what happened or look what I learned from that. all I know is that the constant is writing, and I really want to make that front and center. And I would love to get to a point where my writing supports my family instead of all the other things that I do as well. So that's the goal. But, I'm working on the next book, and I'm barely even thinking about the book after that. So it'll come to me as it comes to me and what I want to write about. But I really believe it's important to be in the moment and to do the work in front of you. And there will always be work to do.
It's amazing. I'm actually a musician, and part of rehearsing and playing and being in the studio and playing music is you have your instrument with you, and it's within arm's reach, and you're always doing it, and you get that muscle memory.
Yes.
So if something happens, for example, I was playing one show and all of the lights went out. Somebody tripped over the cord in the middle of a song, and myself and the drummer, we played in the dark.
Wow.
All the way through until somebody finally plugged the light back in, and the crowd went crazy because the song didn't end.
That's cool.
But I didn't even need to see my hands. Muscle memory was just there. We had rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed. And for a writer, I would think that if you're always in the process of writing, that muscle gets stronger and stronger to the point where things that were hard early on in your writing career become more easier because you're using and you're developing new words and new ways of approaching how you write. So is that muscle memory real for you as well then?
Absolutely. I think that's a great analogy, and kudos to you for playing in the dark. That must have been super cool. It's really important to just, if you want to do something, you do it and you gain your skills. And there are people who are born with that natural creativity, but I don't believe that you have to be a writer from a young age. I think you can learn to notice, to observe, to put words together. And everybody is always growing in their skills. And so the writer I am today is far better than the writer I was 10 years ago and earlier than that. So, it's about exercising that muscle and really building it so that it's stronger. 100%.
I love it.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I know I've thrown a lot at you, but there's got to be something I missed. What can we do to encourage authors that are listening? And then part 2 for readers, how do we encourage them to support authors and also buy your book? What am I missing that we haven't talked about?
So it's a lot of questions. I think, the best way to support authors is to read books in whatever format you get. And so even if you're taking them out of the library and you're not necessarily buying a book, write a review. Go to Goodreads, go to Amazon, write a review for the author. If you didn't like the book, it's kind of nice to not write a bad review and just it didn't work for you. And there's plenty of books that I put aside because it just didn't grab me. Doesn't mean it's bad writing. It just means that it didn't resonate for me. And so I think it's important to remember that there is a person behind those words and be gracious, so don't trash them if you can avoid it. And I think that, if you want to write, the best thing you can do is surround yourself with other writers, read a lot, and then consider doing a writing class or going on a writer's retreat and just dip your toe in the waters of that writer community. I found it to be incredibly supportive, incredibly fun, and it just encourages me, to do more and to come back to it if I'm ever doubting it or not believing that my words have value. I will say also, and you can find all kinds of ways to write with me on my website, which I hope you'll share in the show notes.
Oh, yes, please.
But I do have a monthly free write-along. And so people they gather on Zoom on the first Saturday of the month, usually the first, sometimes it's the second, but there's a schedule on my website and you can sign up for it. And then you get the link every time with a reminder. And it is an hour and a half of writing. I bring prompts, but other people just work on their project. And it's a great way to be in community with other writers. And I can tell you some people who really didn't call themselves writers started by coming to that, and they have produced amazing works because they feel emboldened by being in a community of writers. And we get people from literally every corner of the world. And so it's really, really cool. So if you just want to dip a toe in the water, it's free and it's monthly and they're really nice people and you'll get some prompts and maybe you'll write something. So it'll be fun.
I love it. Okay. So with that, we talked about that marketing resource possibly as well that would be available, which is amazing. Yep. So where do we go and all that? And as well, where are you most active on social as well?
Yeah. So, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn pretty regularly. Follow me everywhere. My website is lynnegolodner.com. And so, hopefully you'll put that in there. There's a page on there called Write with Lynne, and that's where you'll find the write-alongs. You'll find other stuff as well. And if you want to email me, David put my email in the show notes. It's Lynne with an E at yourppl.com. Your People is my marketing company. And send me an email and say you want the marketing plan template for authors, and I'm happy to send it to you. And, it's the first step in the right direction.
See? Value. Give. I love it.
Absolutely. Yep.
Lynne, thank you so much. I'm listening to your podcast. I love it.
Thank you.
So you have some Canadian listens showing up in your analytics. That'll probably be me, one of the Canadians.
Awesome.
There's more than one of us in Canada, but
yes.
I'm there.
Awesome.
So I'm enjoying the show. Keep going. Keep doing what you do. And we're cheering you on. Can you come back in the future? Because I love our conversation.
Yeah, I'd love it. Anytime. Just let me know and we'll put a date on the calendar, David.
Because at least once a year, we're going to have to talk about your next book. So
absolutely,
I'm going to have an ongoing guest for the next many, many years. So
excellent. And tell Jennifer, I want to hear what she thinks of The Woman of Valor. So
there you go. You're going to get an amazing review from Jennifer for sure. So
awesome.
Thank you, Lynne, so much. Everyone go check out the show notes. So much value for you as an author, a reader. There's so much good stuff coming out here from Lynne. And check out the podcast. Make sure you go and like and subscribe and follow and do all those things as well. And enjoy another podcast about authorship from another podcaster who's doing such great things. Lynne, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, David.
Thanks for being part of the podcast again. Appreciate you investing time in the show and you for listening this far. Thank you. One thing to keep in mind is we are looking for help and some support for the podcast. If you are able to help support our show, our little podcast show here, we can go over to livingthenextchapter.com and all the instructions will be there to help support the show. It takes about $30 to $40 a month to do this, just for the hosting and all of that other stuff that we pay for. But if the show is giving you any value and you're enjoying what's happening here, would love any kind of support that you can offer. That would be great. And you being here and sharing the show helps us grow, helps us get great new authors on the show, connect with other listeners, and build community. So whatever you can do to share this show today, I really appreciate it. Thank you for being here for Living the Next Chapter, and I can't wait to share the next one with you. Talk soon. Have a great day.